We're in conversation now with Group CEO of Oakbay Investments, Mr. Nazeem Howa, who will explain to us really the intricacies around the Tegeta-owned mine, Optimum mine, which is making news headlines now in terms of its relationship with Escom. So welcome, Nazeem, and thanks so much for joining us. Just if you were to explain exactly the procurement of Glencore, their debt, and also how Tegeta will now continue the relationship with Escom.
Well, you know, we entered negotiations with Glencore about June last year to look at buying the asset called Optimum. And Optimum consists of the Optimum coal mine, Quinfernane coal mine, Optimum coal terminal, and 3 or 4 other dormant properties. And talks broke down once or twice along the way when Glencore thought they had a much better offer. But eventually they came back to us. I think we're very happy to hear the BRPs announced that we were the most viable and credible offer. And for that reason, they gave it to us. So we inherited a couple of coal mining contracts when that happened. Before that, we actually had one coal mining contract, which we got in March last year, which is at our Brakfontein mine. I think there we're getting a contract for 270 Rand a ton of coal, which is much lower than the market would have. And that's based really on the quality of coal we supply from that mine.
All right. Do you have an unfair advantage in the sense of, if you take what the conventional wisdom is on the alleged state capture and the close relationship of the Gupta families to the president?
Well, you know, the difficulty I think with that convention is the lack of proof behind it. Because, you know, you can say anything you want in the world. The real challenge is to provide proof to back it up. The Glencore deal, I led the negotiations. Anything that went right or wrong is my responsibility, together with a very tight-knit team. They delivered on that project. In terms of all our relationships with Escom, myself and 2 or 3 other executives are engaged with them. We must remember, of course, it was very widely reported in the media. The family left the country on the 8th of April. They resigned all the executive and non-executive positions and left the management team in charge of the business. So they're not really involved. Any relationship is arm's length, transparent, on pure commercial terms between ourselves and Escom.
But isn't there a legitimate expectation from the family who's been crying victim to say that they're unfairly judged and that these allegations are unsubstantiated? And yet the family does have a recourse to either go the court route for defamation or even go to any other tribunal, judicial inquiry, etc. Why is it that the family hasn't exercised that?
Well, let me use a few. I think maybe you mix a few of these issues. Judicial inquiries are determined by government. At the moment, I think there is a criminal complaint to the Hawks by the Democratic Alliance, and we've welcomed it. Hopefully it will put an end to the rumors and whispering campaign. The ANC wanted to investigate state capture. We welcomed it. Fortunately, the outcome was something that we were very happy to receive. But we welcome that one as well, and we'll welcome any other activity. The reason we've really not gone to the courts is it takes 2 years to get onto the court roll. By that time, the damage has been done and over and forgotten. In fact, the conventional wisdom will be you're reopening old sores, because people would have forgotten the lies that people have published by them.
Be that as it may, though, if Oakbay Investments and its subsidiary companies are so concerned about the reputational damage that is reflected and reported on week in, week out in newspaper headlines, that there's very seldom a response to every allegation that is being made. That in itself means that it's either that Oakbay Investments or the Gupta family consent to what is being said, or you ignoring the allegations with the hope that it will go away. What is the strategy to say, this is our position and we're going to defend our honor and our integrity?
Well, Cindy, I think I'm going to preview a third scenario. The third scenario is a sense of frustration, that nothing we do will change the narrative out there. It's an inconvenient truth when we respond. And, you know, very often I've spent many years in journalism. And very often I think those questions are really a justification to publish. So we'll ask you the question so we can say you have had a right of reply. But I liken it very often to the question very often asked of men, have you stopped beating your wife? There's no right answer. And I think that's what they try to do with us in terms of positioning us. We've got nothing to be scared of, we've got nothing to be afraid of, in that we've done nothing wrong. We've tried to create a business.
All right, let's just go back to the Optimum coal mine, in the sense that in supplying Escom with coal now, and particularly Arnott Power Station, that in itself, there is a cloud of suspicion, if you will, that one, in the way that you, together, procured this particular mine was by default that you ended up on the government supply list? Or have you done previous business with Eskom?
We have one other contract with Escom, as I mentioned, Brockfontein, which we've had since March last year. And again, I say we talks broke down twice before we closed the Glencore deal. So it's not that by default there were other bidders. Essentially, we're the ones who could come up with the money in time. We're the ones who could prove to the seller that we could fund the deal. And those are important considerations.
All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts maybe of the agreement in itself, that you had insisted on a prepayment from Eskom before you started supplying coal to Arnott Power Station.
Well, I think the question of the prepayment was Eskom's request to us was to increase the supply of coal to Arnott. At that stage, as it still is today, the mine Optimum is in business rescue. On the basis of business rescue, you don't really have credit facilities because nobody knows whether you're going to come out of business rescue or not. So you don't have a credit line with anybody. You have to make weekly payments to anybody who supplies you. So when Eskom approached us also at that stage, sorry if I go back 1 minute, we also had our bank accounts being frozen and closed by the 4 major banks in South Africa. So when Eskom approached us to say, we want you to supply more coal for Arnott, our first response was, how are we going to do that? Because we needed to do some development work on Optimum to be able to meet their requirements. We had to produce more coal to be able to meet their requirements. So we therefore said to them, initially, no, we can't do it. But in further discussions with them, we said we could do it if there was a prepayment involved, which would fund it. So what have we done? Let me talk to you about what we've done. On the Optimum coal mine, we have, in fact, we've doubled production since when we bought the mine. When we bought the mine, we were doing 400,000 tons per month. Today, we're doing 800,000 tons per month. And I hope in the next month or so, we'll do 1 million tons per month. We've done that by bringing back, recommissioning one of the drag lines, which Glencore had closed down last year, June. So we've brought it back. And we've brought in 70 or 80 more employees to run the drag line.
Is this concession afforded to any other players in the industry? Is there a certain lenience, if you will, towards Optimum from Eskom's side?
I wish there was, Cindy. But the harsh reality, when we bought Optimum, 2 things were made very, very clear to us by Eskom. First one, you will keep the contract in place that we have. It's a 150 Rand contract per ton. You will honor that contract to the end of contract, which we'll do. The second one, you will take responsibility for the penalty of 2 billion, and we've taken that responsibility. But I'll go one further. The history of coal mining has been dominated by 4 or 5 major mines. They all have cost-plus models, and let me explain the cost-plus model. The cost-plus model works on the basis that Eskom funds their capital development as well as the operating costs and give them a profit on top of that. Those are generally done, particularly for capital, in advance payment, so it's not an unusual thing for Eskom to do. They do it all the time in the cost-plus models. But also Optimum is different to every other mine. It is in business rescue. It is very different in business rescue. Glencore put it in business rescue in August last year. In September last year, Glencore got Eskom to pay them weekly for all coal supplied. I don't believe any other mine gets paid weekly. That was done by Glencore in September last year. We've inherited that benefit simply because we're in business rescue. So that's the magic, the difference, not the magic, the difference between this mine and any other mine.
So are you insinuating that because you came to disrupt the market, as it were, because there was the monopoly of the 5 key players, as you cited, that they're coming at you from all angles, there's all these other allegations purely because you are an independent competitor in a space where only a few had enjoyed the benefits of mining?
Well, Together is a black-owned company. The Guptas are not the major shareholder. They are a major, but not the biggest shareholder in the company. So Together is the biggest, I think, the biggest black-owned in terms of coming into that business right now. Certainly, I think we've created a lot more transparency in coal trading. You know, I say very often to my colleagues at Oakbay that coal mining was really not a subject covered by anybody a few months ago. Since we've entered, it's been a hugely covered area. I would say even more than that. We supply, as Together, our supply to Eskom is under 5%, probably closer to 4% of Eskom's total supply. Yet anything written about Escom and coal revolves around Tegeta. There's 95% which is ignored.
So why is it this notoriety then has been brought into the sector, primarily when Tegeta, Oakbay Investment Holdings is now in the space? What is it about Oakbay Investment Holdings? What is it about the Gupta family that attracts this kind of negativity?
Well, you know, I wish I could answer it with any sense of certainty. But perhaps I'll say to you the biggest challenge for us is we are a disruptor in any industry. And why do I say we are a disruptor? When you go back to our group, we bought Sahara, we disrupted that industry by coming with low value, low cost, high quality items. It disrupted the market. We launched New Age and we said we're going to be pro-government. We came at a low cover price. We went 9 provinces and it disrupted the industry, which was very, very settled. I think we've done the same thing with ANN7 and we've done the same thing now with Optimum into the gold mine. So we've disrupted what used to be a very cozy environment. And I think that's upset a lot of people. But we're very proud of what we've done. Our actions have really been about bolstering the rights of South Africans to convenient and low-priced electricity. At this point, Endrina, which we supply, is the lowest cost supply for Escom of any other coal mine in this country. Absolutely the lowest. We're very proud of that. I think if we can make that for all of our coal mines, it will make a huge difference to the South African economy.
And having said that, yes, on the one side, you are giving a new face to the economy, as it were, allowing for greater black participation in an industry that had been predominantly and still dominantly white-owned. And your vision going forward, yes, you're going to disrupt, and along the way, you will incur some war scars, but I'm sure the family primarily would want to have vindication, to say, look, our books are open. You've been saying this, and yet it's being treated as a PR exercise. Is it a case of a syndicated group, as we've heard that there's an orchestration of wanting to muzzle Oakbay Investments and particularly the Gupta family out of business and wish them into oblivion? Is that an orchestrated attempt, if you will, by corporate South Africa?
Well, you know, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but I want to give you a wonderful example of why Oakbay will ruffle feathers, why we will make a difference in the industry. In around about September last year, Escom gave notice to Exxaro on a 40-year cost-plus contract for a mine called Arnott. And that contract ended at the end of December. They then put it out to tender, I think in September last year. Of course, we didn't know we would close Optimum, so we were not one of the people who tendered for the long-term contract at Arnott. So we're not in the running for the long-term contract. Let me make that very clear. In January, we were approached by Escom to say, would you be able to and interested in supplying some coal? I should say Optimum was approached to supply coal to Arnott, which we did. We did it at 480 Rand a ton. The Exxaro contract of a year before was at 980 Rand a ton. They were planning to go up to 1,360 Rand a ton going forward. But even at the 980 Rand a ton, extrapolated at the number of tons supplied, it's a saving of 2 billion Rand per annum to Escom.
How can you justify those costs, though? If you come in or undercut, if you will, you were saying that it was 900 per ton and you came in at 480. What does that say about the quality of the coal, number one? And secondly, how do you optimize, or how is the business then profitable if you come at that low margin? I
think we businessmen who understand profitability, and we manage profitability very, very well. But let me deal with quality. Quality is a very, very, very big issue for Escom. From my little time in the industry, Escom have what they call roamers and rovers who visit your mines 24/7. They're on your mines all the time. They do sampling of coal by the stockpile at our site and at their sites. So they're checking coal constantly on both sides. Let me deal with Optimum. Glencore have left us a wonderful, wonderful world-class testing system. They're able to lifetime test coal quality every 5 minutes. But more importantly, we visited Endrina, our mine manager visited Endrina on Thursday last week to check with them whether they were happy with the quality of coal we're supplying. And they were very, very happy. So there's enough checks and balances on our side and on the Escom side to make sure that quality is never an issue.
There's been many requests made by our colleagues in the media requesting an authentic, official voice, authoritative voice to speak on the issues around Oakbay investments. And you've been conspicuous by your absence. Why is that?
Well, I don't think we've been conspicuous by absence. I think where it's been relevant, we've been very open and happy to be interviewed. But I really stress where it's been relevant, and that's been the occasions we've taken up.
And the relevance dictated by who? Who prescribes what the relevance is in an interview?
We're going to always consider the business interests. And our business interests must dominate everything else, as well as the public interest. And the difficulty facing us always, and I see it every day, journalists like to put forward we're acting in the public interest, but I often wonder about agendas that they are trotting out at the same time.
And what would that agenda be? Because if we as journalists are supposed to reflect the truth and be impartial, to uncover every little dirty item or whatever skeletons may be, and that is put forward, whose agenda then are you suggesting the media is serving?
Let me deal with the media industry that we hold, New Age and ANN7. There are two key principles that apply there, or three key principles. The first one is we're always going to act in the best interest of the common person. The second one, we're going to be pro-government in the way we go forward, because government is really being elected by the majority of citizens. And the third one is we're not going to propagate the view of the shareholder. Those are three very, very key principles. But let me throw it back to you as a veteran journalist. Do we not as journalists have a serious responsibility to ask questions when 3 or 4 people or 3 or 4 media organizations come with the same version of the truth? Surely as a journalist, we must then be saying to ourselves, why am I being told this?
Granted, but I mean, there are many sources, and it's a dime a dozen every day. Any opinion that you ask of people, we often open the lines when we have discussions. And the first thing is the personal attack on one's character, to say you are compromised, you are captured. There's nothing that is legitimate about you. So, I mean, how then do you expect, especially staff members who find themselves in this precarious position, to have to respond? It's not our job to defend the Gupta family. It is our job to do what we are mandated to do.
But, any day that we are telling you what to do would be a day we've done the wrong thing. And I can tell you this, I would say there's never been a day we've asked you to do anything in the wrong way for any wrong reason. And that tells me that our journalists must feel they're not captured. They should be feeling they're not captured, because they have the freedom to do what they want to do.
How much investment and energy do you spend in terms of dealing with the reputational aspects of what the company does, and how does it impact on your business relations and your public, what people may view Oakbay Investments to be all about? Do you really care about the reputational
Of course we do.
Nuances?
Of course we do. But it would be crazy for us to worry on that matter versus the need for us to sustain the business and ensure the safety of 7,500 livelihoods. So it's a balance we have to do every single day. Right now, my day consists, I would say, 90% primarily of ensuring that we keep the doors open, we keep the job safe, and that people feel happy in this environment.
All right, can you share with our viewers just the vision, in terms of where Oakbay Investments, what are your intentions in these particular industries? Yes, we understand it's about job creation, impacting or transforming the local economy, but what is the long-term vision for Oakbay Investments?
We've been left a wonderful legacy by the shareholders. As they've left us, they've said to us, this is the Group Executive Committee. You guys will guide and tell us where you're taking the business. And they've been very true to that position and not interfering with us in any way. Of course, it gives us a wonderful platform to work from. I think mining, we're really looking for other opportunities in the mining environment. We believe that as a low-cost operator, we can bring value to Escom and to South Africa generally. So if we can push the coal price down, ordinary South Africans will benefit.
How?
That's our goal. Because then Escom's pricing will be lower. Because Escom's pricing will be dictated by the price it has to pay for coal. So if we come in with a low-cost model, Escom will be able to pass savings or less cost increases going forward to ordinary South Africans.
But the external forces that you have little control about, you cannot dictate in terms of the business agreements you have with the banks, for example, as to when they're going to reopen your bank accounts. The point is, if you're paying the piper, essentially that's a position of power where you can select the tune. Why has the banks had so much power, or even taken away power from Oakbay Investments, if you will?
Well, I think it's a question we'd like answered. I think we visited as many of the banks that would see us, and two of the big four agreed to see us. And we generally started the question with, we're now client and banker. There's no need for any confidentiality between us. So tell us what it is we've done wrong. I can sit here today publicly and say not one of them have given us one example of wrongdoing. Not one. And I say it publicly to challenge them to prove me wrong on that issue.
They had just last week on radio, they had a discussion around documentation or lack of compliance when it comes to certain business interests that Oakbay is involved in, and that hadn't been clarified. Again, it leaves that cloud of confusion or suspicion. Have you heard the same thing around non-compliance?
My big question, Sandy, is we sit in a country with a wonderfully strong and independent judiciary. If this was the case, surely there would be some criminal charges against us. There are very strong FICA regulations. So if the banks have any evidence, they'll be breaking the law by not bringing it forward.
But why now? I mean, Oakbay Investments or the Gupta family have been involved in the, the landscape and society of South Africa in various departments in different generations. I mean, they have met with former President Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki, with AJ Gupta being part of the International Marketing Council at the time before it became Brand SA. So why all of this onslaught and targeting the family in the past couple of months or years?
I wish we knew the answer. Our greatest desire, leave us alone, let us run our business. That's our greatest desire. Myself, together with the Group Executive Committee, we want to grow the business. That's our single interest in life. We'd love to have access to banking facilities. We'd love to be able to have normal relations with everybody. We've committed ourselves to arm's length, transparent transactions. So we'd love nothing better than that. So we don't understand what's being done to us. Because if we've done something wrong, we'll understand it.
Maybe if I gave you this anecdote, in the sense that Nikki Oppenheimer, under the administration of Thabo Mbeki, and this also comes from a reliable source who was in that room, that they would command the entire cabinet to sit in the family library and essentially dictate what the economic policy and monetary policy ought to be, including the Labour Relations Act, in how they do their operations, and government would be held to ransom in a sense. But those kind of things don't make headlines. I mean, I'm not even sure if anybody else would follow through on looking at the relationship between business and government, that this is something that is not untoward. It's something that is generally practiced internationally. It's global benchmarking.
I don't know the occasion of that, but it's not a space we want to be in. Again, I say we want to be running our business. We want to focus our business. We don't want to be involved in politics in any way whatsoever.
But you would have to know who the Minister of Minerals is. In whatever space you're in, you would have to engage with the regulators, even with government for that matter. So at which point then does it become inappropriate, especially in the light of what we see in the public discourse, that there is too close a relationship between the president and the Gupta family? Therefore, vis-a-vis, people would argue that he's the one that's unlocking all these opportunities.
But Sunday, again, I would quote the statistic audited by KPMG. 1% of our turnover comes from government sources. So what does this closeness mean? It's a question I would love an answer. How's the benefit of this closeness?
Yeah, but Mr. Howa, you would know that perception is something that is very different and difficult to influence. You can have your stance point. They could be your dissenters, if you will, or critics would have one version of the truth. What is the middle ground? What is the real truth here?
The difficulty is the truth is really going to be determined by reality and what has actually happened. And that has to be based on facts. I think the difficulty for us at the moment is you have a whispering campaign that's growing into a shouting campaign without a single shred of evidence. The ANC had an inquiry. Out of its own membership, one person came forward with a written submission. So, you've got to say to yourself, where's the proof around all of these whispering campaigns? in any area, in any investigation.
But it's a well-orchestrated, syndicated kind of approach in attacking Oakbay Investments and the Gupta family primarily. How do you see this play out? I mean, what is the best case scenario, or even possibly if you're anticipating a worst case scenario?
Well, you know, the difficulty facing us is we don't know, because we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know what's driving it. We're going to continue driving our business. We're going to continue making sure that we are good South African corporate citizens, that we act in the best interest of the country. And we hope that will carry us through the period. Our appeal to our detractors or our media people, and as a journalist, my appeal to them is really, when people tell you something, ask why you're being told this. Check the facts. When I come back to the Escom matters, if we have 5% supply of coal, how can we have 95% of the attention? Why is nobody asking questions about the 95%? If you want to ask us about our pricing structure, extend it into a pricing structure that involves the 95% as well. At least we'll have context in the issue.
So you're saying that there's a general degeneration of journalism in the country, that it's very source-based in the sense that it's either a press statement or you go with a whim of whoever says, who has something notable to say, and it's printed. It's not corroborated.
I'm not going to accuse our journalists of doing that. My appeal to them is to really to contextualize everything they do. That is my appeal. To say, if you're looking at Tegeta, we've been in the industry now for 12, 15, 16 months, in the coal supply industry, 16 months. We've now managed 5% of supply, 1% through the starting of a new mine, let me say a disused mine, we've restarted, and for 3.5% we've bought through the Glencore transaction. That's our sole supply. We've not had one mining contract from government, not one.
Mr. Howa, but still, is the alternative voice readily available when these allegations and stories are being made? Are you given the opportunity, the right of reply before stories are either printed or aired?
Ma'am, I would say to you, in 50% of the chances I would say no. In the other 50% they'll publish the negative narrative and give one paragraph at the end as right of reply. And that must be a concern for us. But you know, the challenge for us is always going to be, show us the evidence of any wrongdoing. And to date, nobody has come forward and done that.
Yes, but if there's false reports about you, then there's the press ombudsman, there's the South African National Editors Forum, there is even writing to the very same newspaper and hauling their editors in a room to say, we don't like the way you represent our company. It's actually contrary to what we had said to your journalists. Why isn't there isn't that kind of recourse that you're willing to exercise?
We've tried very hard on some of these forums. I don't think it's not delivered on its perceived independence in a lot of ways. And for that reason, I think we've stepped away from those issues. The courts, I've said to you, is we believe there's a stronger approach, but it's a 2-year process on it. But you know, the worry for me, and again I say as a former journalist, just as an independently minded person, should we not be saying to ourselves, how can 95% of media coverage be on a 5% supply of coal?
Yes, but the common man is bombarded with messaging all the time that seems to be aligned with one particular angle of the story, that this is wrong, Gupta family came in here and literally took over control of the state. We know that that's not the case, but this is what you hear on a day-to-day basis. You don't hear the alternative voice.
Ma'am, is journalism not about us saying to ourselves, why is this narrative being pushed when it's not true? Is that not the role of journalists?
But what is the truth? Where do you get the truth? If the one angle, the stories and the sources come forward and talk negatively about
the first principle of journalism, substantiate the facts. First principle of journalism. How do you substantiate the facts?
I suppose it's a difficult one, because if we're not presenting, or Oakbay Investments is not presenting the facts. I mean, there's an advertisement that you took out on the New Age, and first question is, why is it not published in independent media?
Well, independent media declined to take the advertisement as a group. We did place it in some of the other newspapers. It wasn't only in New Age, but the Star, in fact, refused to publish the ad.
I mean, you're paying them money and they refuse, based on what? What is the...
They have the right to make that decision, and they chose to make that decision.
Okay. How do you sustain the business, though, with this kind of negative cloud?
No, I think the negative cloud is really a perception from some media. But we engage with our stakeholders on a day-to-day basis. On the basis of our service delivery, people are very, very happy. If I go back to Escom, we've not failed on any quality test. We've not failed on any delivery test.
Mm-hmm. Operationally, maybe, but I mean, let's just look at in terms of your interpersonal relations, just with the employees. There's the issue, 1 or 2 employees who were quoted saying that they treated like dogs, to use that particular phrase. There's issues of inequality when it comes to payments of staff, etc. I'm fairly new as well in the company, so these are things that one would want to get answers to.
No, I'm very happy that we do that through the appropriate forum. You're asking me that question without me knowing the detail of it. But I would, without hesitation, say it's absolute rubbish. I would really, without any hesitation, say that to you.
But with the common man, again, we have an opportunity to tell our story and our perspective of what the true agenda is. And there has been accusation of spewing propaganda, again, going back to the media. So if internally there are those cracks or there is that kind of dissatisfaction, ultimately it will then leak into the very hands of the opposition, if you will, or the dissenters.
You're 100% correct on that one. And I think, our challenge is to ensure that we create the forums where people can air their worries, their concerns, their questions, and we have to deal with it. And I think particularly that is a big focus in all of our business units, as it would be in any other business.
What gives you hope going forward, even in the midst of this cloud or the storm, if you will? What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the people around us. Yes, like any other business, we have some negativity in our own business. But the majority of our people are very positive, very, very task-orientated people. They're wanting to build the biggest and best business going. We got lots of questions about why we were buying Optimum, and I really want to come back to Optimum. Nobody could understand our purpose of buying Optimum. But the facts and the stats speak for themselves. When we inherited the business, we took it over 400,000 tons per month. We've taken it to 800,000 per tons, and we'll hit 1 million very soon. We've increased the number of employees there against the trend in the industry right now. That gives me great hope, because it means we've got a great executive team, a great management team at Optimum, and overall a sense of really doing good for this country, creating jobs, and ensuring that we become a sustainable and viable economy. We'll pick up detractors along the way. But our biggest success will be that we impact this economy and we try and truly transform it. And that's what we're going to do.
History in the making does come with its own costs of sacrifice and I suppose taking the negativity and the accusations, but you focused in terms of where you want to take the business, and you're not deviating from that.
Certainly not, but I'll take you back a few years in our history. And not that we have any aspiration of being compared to Madiba. Madiba was vilified. He was called a terrorist, as was Chris Hani. But, the ANC itself was called a bunch of terrorists who killed innocent people. But they persisted through all of that because they knew they had to deliver this rainbow nation. Our failure, perhaps, was we got our political freedom in 1994. We now have to achieve our economic freedom, and that's our big challenge going forward.
Just before we let you go, Mr. Howa, just the interest for Tegeta Mining, the list of acquisitions that you have. Can you give us a sense of how many you have?
Well, the latest acquisition was Optimum. Of course, right now, I think we're looking to grow the business even further. And yes, we'll bring a lot more of our detractors to the fore. But our plan is to acquire some more mines as we go along.
Yeah, and are you tendering to supply coal more extensively or more quantities to Eskom?
As opportunities come up, we'll certainly apply. Our view is very simply, we should have the same rights as every other person in this industry. Not any different rights, not better, not worse. We should be able to compete with all the other coal supply companies on the same terms and conditions. And if we afforded that opportunity, we'll be very, very happy.
And you go through the same supply chain process of submitting tender documents with the necessary
the media scrutiny
documents.
makes us a lot more watched than any other media company. And we don't mind it, we love it. Because that scrutiny makes sure everything is done transparently at arm's length in the correct way.
Okay, that's our In Conversation. Thanks indeed for your time again, much appreciated. We're of course in conversation with Group CEO for Oakbay Investment Holdings, and that's Mr. Nazeem Howa. And thanks indeed for you at home for watching.
come look
All
at
right,
it.
so we're in conversation with Group CEO of Oakbay Investment Holdings, and that's Mr. Nazeem Howa. And thanks again, Mr. Howa, for your time. Just looking at the whole drama, if you will, saga with Tegeta procuring Optimum Mine. Just talk us through the financing of this particular asset.
Well, you know, when we looked at Optimum, we obviously were looking at a very different time for this deal. When we closed the deal, we had engaged with the banks who are owed 2.5 billion, and it was a very sad day for us when we spoke to all of the banks. Not one of them would actually assist us in financing this deal. So we've actually done it through some other banking, through a mixture of debt and internal funding, our own cash. And in fact, although those banks didn't support us, we had to prove to them that we had the cash to do the deal before they agreed to do the deal with us. They were the primary decision makers on the basis that they held the assets.
So why would the banks refuse, considering that they would be earning interest and all sorts of other administration fees on this transaction?
It was a big confusion to us because we gave them what we believe to be deals that nobody would refuse. But they declined to borrow us the finance to do this deal.
So does the company have just cash lying around? I mean, how do you, this is 2.5 billion rand is no small change by any stretch of the imagination. How did you manage to get this funding?
We did it through, some of it was through debt, the rest was through our own funding. But any company at any one point in time will have some cash there, here and everywhere. And that's what we use to fund the deal as well as the bank debt.
Yeah. Do you enjoy preferential treatment from Escom as a group?
I wish we did. Unfortunately, I think we have a tougher time than most because of the constant focus on us. I think Escom puts us through the ringer more than they would most others.
And you've passed that particular scrutiny
Certainly,
all the time?
Certainly, I believe we have. I don't think that we've got any special treatment whatsoever from Escom.
Okay, so just getting back onto tendering for long-term supply of coal for Arnott, you were saying earlier that you would pursue, as any business entity would do, future opportunities. And why then is there, it's almost like there's an expectation that Oakbay Investments must just play dead and roll over and not participate in business actively. Why do you think that is?
Well, in terms of the Arnott long-term agreement, we didn't tender. But our view certainly is that we should be treated like any other person or organization tendering for Eskom business or any other business. We should have the same rights, the same position as anybody else, and judge us on the same criteria. And we're happy for that position because we believe that we are superior in terms of our business acumen and our ability to deliver beyond expectations of any party we contract.
There's also been an allegation from certain media houses that whenever you're invited to be given the right of reply opportunity, you've been very conspicuous in your absence. Is there anything to hide? Why is it that you don't entertain media invitations for interviews?
Well, I think it's absolutely untrue. We've responded as best we can in a lot of cases. We've been disappointed very often by the manner in which our responses have been twisted and turned to suit the particular agenda. One case this week has been some questions from Carte Blanche, particularly around the issues of Escom. Our response to them was we were happy to do a live studio interview. They've declined that. And our concern was we didn't want to allow the opportunity for twisting our words. We find it very strange that they were not prepared to take up the offer of a live interview.
That's very strange because that would be the big fish in essence. But are you willing then to give a response on the written submission of the list of questions that they've sent?
Well, our difficulty is how it will be projected, how it will be twisted, how it will be turned. Our position at this point is really to do live interviews. So then we know that the essence of our words are carried through to the audience out there.
So when the press itself comes out and say Oakbay or particularly Group CE was afforded the invitation to come and speak to us, but he subsequently declined because he wouldn't submit to our processes of having a pre-recorded interview, how is the public, the viewer, supposed to interpret this?
Well, I hope they will understand that our willingness to be questioned by anybody stands at any point in time. But just given the history of how we've been treated and maltreated, we've really set some conditions around interviews, and that is primarily they have to be live so that we know that it cannot be altered in any way following the interview.
Yeah. Are you confirming that there is distrust, there is an animosity, a hostility between Oakbay Investments and the media generally?
I don't want to use any of those adjectives. I want to say that we've taken a more careful route simply because of our disappointment around previous ways in which stories have been
Well, the
mistreated.
media hasn't written anything flattering about Oakbay Investments, so clearly there is hostility from one part to the other.
I will leave those words with you. I wouldn't say that. From our point of view, we have no hostility against anyone. Our appeal to the media is treat us fairly.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks again, Mr. Howa. We're in conversation with the CEO of Oakbay Investment Holdings, Mr. Nazeem Howa. And thanks again for joining us.